we have to save this video because I'm giving out some really good information that I don't think I've ever talked to people about before. But if you're moving to a 6-month review in California, I'm going to tell you what you need to do to get your child back. Okay. You do not have to take notes. All I really want you to do is listen. What the first thing you're going to have to do is you're going to have to participate in your disposition case plan or your reunification case plan. All right. They may have listed 5, 10 things for you to do. Who knows? But it's stuff like individual counseling to address blah, blah, blah. It's group counseling to address blah, blah, blah. It's domestic violence counseling to address blah, blah, blah. It's substance abuse
Yeah, that's what it is.
Substance abuse counseling to address blah, blah, blah. It's drug testing, random drug testing to make sure that you're testing clean. It's parenting class, blah, blah. So you got to do all those services. Okay. Now, here's the key, and this is where they're going to trick you or trip you up. In the services, you're going to have the counselor write a letter or come to court to testify that you did great in the courses in the counseling and that you learned, everything there is to learn about. And that here's the key word, internalized what you've learned, meaning you use what you've learned. Okay. It wasn't like they taught you how to bake a cake and all you guys did was talk about it. You actually went and baked that cake and it tasted great. So that's what you're going to have to be able to do. Now, here's the pitfalls. Social workers make friends with these service providers. Social workers pay these service providers. So sometimes allegedly, you get the social worker saying to the individual counselor, hey, we both know Faith didn't learn shit in counseling, so your letter should reflect that. When in fact, Faith did great in the counseling. Get it?
Yeah.
Okay. So you are going to have to form relationships, friendships, professional friendships with these people and ask them for weekly emails saying how great you're doing. Then when the social worker comes around 6 months from now and writes a report and calls the therapist and says, hey, we all know Faith didn't do shit in this class, the therapist is either going to say, well, wait a minute, I wrote her 10 emails saying she's doing great, right? Or if she does write that letter that the social worker wants, you'll have the backup to go to court to say, well, when you call her as a witness, well, you told me for 10 weeks I was doing great. And all of a sudden, when the social worker called you on such and such a date, you said this. Were you influenced by the social worker? Get it?
Yeah, that's a good idea.
I know. I do this for a living, believe it or not. Next, you have to visit. You have to visit frequently. Okay. You have to visit regularly. Don't miss visits. I've seen people lose their kid. They've done everything they're supposed to do. They did it great. And then, because the visits were shitty, they didn't get the kid back. Okay. So you have to have outstanding visits. All right. Outstanding visits means you're on time, you're not late. Okay. They love to throw that in your face. Number 2, you don't miss any visits. All right. Number 3, that the visits go really well. There was a woman that used to have a show on my YouTube station, a YouTube channel, who became an expert at having visits with her kid. And I never really gave it that much thought, but this is what she would do. She would bring food and snacks for the kid. All right. Apparently that makes a big impression on social workers who are monitoring your visits. Second, she would have an activity plan to do with the kid, age-appropriate activity, like reading, playing a game, watching a DVD and a portable DVD player.
Mhm.
You know, this lady got so creative that she started advising people, and judges were amazed when she went to testify. Judges were amazed at all of the things that she had developed to have good visits. Sometimes they give you these visits in a 10 by 10 room, you know, with just a table and two chairs, like, and it's inside. Like, what are you supposed to do? Right? So plan out your visits. Don't just show up and say, I'm here, and expect magic to happen. Because ain't magic's not gonna happen unless you make it happen. You don't argue with social workers. Okay. It gets you nowhere, and it probably will get you in the negative. All right. 38 years ago, when I first became a lawyer, I used to work at a firm, and I was not a seasoned attorney. Okay. And I had a friend of mine who was African American. Unfortunately, he's deceased now. He was a mentor of mine. And he pulled me to the side one day and he said, hey, you know, Vince, you are solving problems inside this law firm with nuclear bombs when you only need a 22. And he says, look, everyone knows you're smart. You don't have to prove it. All right. And, you know, we're both being African American. He said something, I'll tell you now, but, you know, it's probably not woke these days. He said, Vince, sometimes you have to shuffle around like a house Negro. He says, you can't be blasting in everybody's face. That was probably the best advice I ever got. I tell you because you want to use that with the social worker, okay? Even if they hate you and they don't like you, you keep smiling in their face, okay? Because people in governmental positions don't do it for the money. They do it for the power and respect. Do what you think is best. But I'm telling you, like my grandma used to tell me, you get more bees with honey. I didn't learn that lesson until I was in my 50s, unfortunately. But you get more bees with honey. Okay. The same thing applies to you and these social workers. Okay. Now, if they're treating you wrong, that's fine. You get, you know, my grandmother used to say, don't get mad, get even. So get your kid back and then sue them. Right? But get your kid back first. Right? Because if you act the wrong way or say the wrong things to them, they're gonna bend over backwards to screw you.
Yeah.
Okay. That's what they're gonna do. All right. So we've talked about the classes, we've talked about the relationship and how to act the social workers, we've talked about the relationship you need with the course providers. All right. And we've talked about your visits. The last thing and the most important thing, okay, and you won't know this until you get to the 6-month hearing. When they write the report and the report says, don't give the child back to Miss Faith, okay, because blah, 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 whatever it is, your attorney is going to have a trial. It might be that day or a different day. It depends on the courtroom and how they do things. They do things differently in LA County, depending on what judge it is. So I'll give you an example. I showed up on a 6-month hearing in LA County. Judge says, do you agree with the recommendation not to return the child to your client? No, judge. He says, okay, we'll pick a trial date. Come back in 6 weeks and we'll have a trial. I recently did a case where I showed up on the 6-month review hearing and the judge said, are you ready? Because the trial's today. I don't set it out further. I have the trial on the date. And if you're not ready to go, too bad, you lose. Now, I happen to know that before I went in because I talked to some people that practice in that courtroom. But I was ready. And I said, oh, by the way, I'm ready, Your Honor. I'm ready to call my first witness. It's the social worker. Well, did you arrange for the social worker to be present? Yes, I did. I sent out a subpoena. He turned, to the county counsel. This is word for client. He said, I didn't know Mr. Davis was serious about the trial. And he rolled his eyes. He says, you got 1 hour to get the social worker here, or I'm ruling in Mr. Davis's favor. Social worker's there in 30 minutes. Okay. So you got to make sure you have your witnesses at the right hearing. That may be the day of the 6-month review hearing, or it may be another day in the future. Whenever it is, your witnesses better be there. Now, who are your witnesses? Oh, they're your children. They're you. They're every service provider that you went to for substance abuse or domestic violence counseling to get up on the stand and say, hey, didn't you write me these emails saying I did such a great job throughout your 12-week or 15-week course? Oh, yeah, you did. You did a great job. Okay. And here, be ready for this, because this happened recently to me. And luckily, I had a conversation with my client the night before the trial. Okay. The judge is going to call you as a witness, or somebody's going to call you as a witness and say, hey, Miss Faith, what did you learn in your parenting class? And when I've seen that done to other people, it's like, can't remember. Guess what the judge said? You're out. 3 strikes, you're out. Okay, so be prepared to tell people shit like what you've learned that week. You know, I once had a client, she was a little overboard, but it worked out great for her. Every time she went to a counseling, she would write a summary, type it out, of what she learned, and she would put it in her note in a file, and she would also email it to the social worker. This is what I learned this week, blah, 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 blah. And then she wrote, this is brilliant. I didn't think of this. She thought of this. Then she wrote how she is using that in her life and how she will use it when the child is returned to her. That's brilliant. You give all those emails to the judge for 6 months? Oh my God. The judge is going to look at this, like if the social worker doesn't recommend the child go home, judge is going to look at the social worker like, you're crazy. Look at this lady. Look what she's done. Because they think, oh, Miss Faith just went to the drug counseling. She didn't learn shit. She just sat there like a bump on the log, scratched her head, picked her nose, and just left after 50 minutes. Right? But what if you actually summarized it for yourself so you could put it in a notebook, send a copy, an email to the social worker? You'd be blowing their minds. So we've talked about everything. We've talked about, what's going to happen at the trial. Now, here's the last thing I want to tell you. I used to be a court-appointed attorney, believe it or not, 25 years ago. Court-appointed attorneys are notorious for not subpoenaing the right witness or any witness to the trial. So this is your child, Faith. It's incumbent upon you to make sure that your attorney sends out the subpoenas and serves them. Sometimes you even have to volunteer to get somebody to prepare the subpoena and have the subpoena served. Lazy court-appointed attorneys will love that. Okay? And then all your witnesses can show up. And, a lot of times what happens at these hearings, if you don't have any witnesses that show up, the county counsel, the prosecutor gets real cocky and, doesn't work anything out with you. But if you show up with all your witnesses, they're like, oh, maybe we can work something out. We can work a deal. And you think it's because you have all your witnesses there to testify for you. And most of the time, it's not that. It's that the prosecutor doesn't want to spend all day listening to 6 witnesses. They made lunch plans to do something in the afternoon. So like, oh shit, Davis has 6 witnesses. We're going to be here all day. I can't do that. I was supposed to pick my kid up at 2:00. Right? Let's settle with Davis and give him what he wants so we can all be done by noon and I can still have my day. Right? That sounds terrible, right? I see it all the time. I've had judges even tell me or say to me and other attorneys, you think I'm going to spend 2 days listening to all of Davis's witnesses? I'm not going to do it. You better settle with Mr. Davis. Just because, I got my witnesses there. They didn't even have to get on the stand, right? Okay, so Faith, that's how you win a 6-month hearing.
Thank you.
Okay. I hope that makes sense to you.
Yes, I'm gonna use all of that. It's gonna work. I already know.
Okay. Now,
thank you so much.
Okay, now here's one thing. I said a lot. You'll get the videotape from Grace or Marissa. Watch it a couple times because I said a lot of stuff in there that's subtle and important. Okay? All right. If you do all of those things, you're going to blow your social worker's mind, you're going to blow your attorney's mind, and you're going to blow away the judge.